and welcome. My guest today is Matt Ross, who wrote and directed Captain Fantastic. Some of you may recognize him from HBO's Silicon Valley, where he plays Gavin Belson, CEO of Hooli. In this interview, we talked to him about the making of his second feature film, Captain Fantastic. Here's a clip from the film and then an interview with Matt Ross.
What we created here may be unique in all of human existence.
All the way to the top.
We created a paradise.
What we're doing out here is so incredible. Our kids are amazing.
Right now, this is your first real test. Remember your training.
They have hot dogs.
What's cola?
Poison water.
To them. They're going to be totally unprepared for the real world.
And I happen to think the opposite is true.
It's child abuse.
I can't say welcome to San Francisco because you are from the Bay Area. So, you know. I live in Berkeley. I know you live in Berkeley, Republic of Berkeley. I'm going to play something because I've been...
I have no idea what this is. Okay, I want it. Oh. Yes, I should have recognized that. That just indicates the fact that I didn't know that Elton John had an album called Captain Fantastic and the Dirt Brown Cowboy until I gave the script to my mother, who said, "Oh, because I played this LP when you were a kid." And I said, "What LP?" I didn't know, obviously, as indicated by my inability to recognize that song. Only afterwards did I realize that title, that my title came from that album. Clearly, on some deeply subconscious level, I must have known about it, but it didn't happen consciously. And it turns out that song and that album have nothing to do with my movie. The title is, I thought, an evocative one and sort of asks a question about the lead character played by Viggo Mortensen. So yes, it's Captain Fantastic.
So I was mulling over the question, how did you get the title? And I was scrambling. Google came to my aid, and I discovered the song. And in an interview, you mentioned what you mentioned just now about your mother having the album. So you just came up with the name? That was the name? Or was it an untitled story when you started writing?
No, I don't know when I titled it, but I'm pretty sure that as I was thinking of the story, when I tend to write a lot of notes down for a long time before a narrative starts to become clear to me, and then I outline it. And I think when I was thinking about this father and this parent and these questions of parenthood and fatherhood and what my values are and the questions I wanted to ask and wanted the narrative to ask, that's when the title came to me. Very early, yeah.
You've been writing this for, what, 2-3 years?
So I was writing it while I was editing my last movie, which would have been 2011. And then I gave it to Lynette Howell-Taylor, who's the creative producer, my producer on the film, after Sundance. My last film was at Sundance, as was this movie, in 2012, in January.
So the first one was 28 hotel rooms.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. I played in the next section in Sundance, yeah. And
Captain Fantastic played both at Sundance and Cannes. Why did you choose those two film festivals to kind of showcase your films? It's just like you went to Juilliard. Do you look for the best?
Well, we were fortunate enough to be invited to both places, but to answer your question, I think yes, Sundance represents the creme de la creme of American independent cinema, North American, but specifically the United States, and Cannes is the best of world art cinema. So, I mean, frankly, we were just fortunate to be invited to both those places. It wasn't so much a game plan as everyone aspires to have their films play in those places.
Mm-hmm. Reading through the production notes, it's very clear that you prepared not only yourself, but your cast and your crew. You put them through a pace. There was a boot camp for the kids. And Viggo got involved in all sorts of aspects of the film, sent you a 12-page note on how, so tell me, you were striving for authenticity in this, because this is I hate to use the word off the grid, but it's a different way of looking at things.
Sometimes it's called back to the land movement, but yes, Viggo sent me well, he doesn't live in the Bay Area, so yeah, he lives in Spain. So he was sending me emails from the moment he said he was going to do the film. We were emailing back and forth really extensively. And I think I printed up the first email he sent me, and I think it was about 12 pages, but that continued all the way through pre-production into production. And yes, some of it's autobiographical, and there were some things that I knew about in terms of the living, this family, this homestead this family's built. And I bumped into a friend of mine at Christmas time before we made the film, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I explained the story, and he said, "Oh, you know so-and-so from high school, he lives just like this." So I called that guy, and we spoke extensively. He lives in Washington State, and he built his own home, and he lives, you can say off the grid. I think off the grid sometimes conjures up ideas of a kind of people that think the apocalypse is coming, and that's not this particular family, or doomsday preparers, and that's not what this is. So I tend to use back to the land movement, which are people who are simply wanting to live in harmony with the natural environment, whether they hunt and fish for their own food, or grow their own food, or have electricity or plumbing in their house, or don't, but it's still people who want to live in communion with nature, really. And so I talked to him extensively about what he did, and he gave me some books to read and some sources to mine. And then when I hired Russell Barnes, who's the production designer, we went through that very extensively. And there's certain things you have to answer, like we show the shelter. You have to have fresh water. That's the first thing that's vital. We show their filtration system and sanitation. We talked about, they have an outhouse, which we show, but there's a lot of modern technology, some that uses chemicals, some that doesn't, and we talked a lot about what they'd have. And then you see them hunting and fishing, and you see that they jar and can food and how they preserve their food. So there's a lot of answers, a lot of questions that you have to answer, and we do that in the first 5-10 minutes of the movie. Yeah.
So how did you get Viggo? Was he the guy that you had in mind?
When I was writing it, I didn't really have any specific person in mind, but he was my first choice, and I just sent it to him. And actors have representatives, and he has an agent and a manager, and they read it, and hopefully they like it. And even if they don't like it, hopefully they send it to their client, allow their client to decide. In this case, they both really liked it, and they sent it to him, and he read it, he liked it, and then we met. We had like a 5-hour meeting, and we just discussed the world and the character, and then once he came aboard, we began to collaborate more. Yeah.
George Mackay acted in Pride,
Yep.
and he's British,
Yep.
so. And he also jumped right in when you sent him the script. What was it like to work with him? How did you work on his accent?
Well, I asked George and Nicholas Hamilton, who's from Australia, to speak in American accents from the moment they came to Washington State, and they did that. Nicholas did it less so. I had to ride him a little bit. He's like his character, is a little more rebellious. George did it absolutely from the moment, and I think the first couple hours, the first day, he felt inauthentic, or he didn't feel like he was himself. But I think if you talk to him and ask him, it was very helpful, because then you don't have to go in and out. You can be riding this wave the whole time and not have to. It's like when you begin to learn a foreign language, the more you speak it, the easier it is. You begin to dream in it. George, I'd only seen him, I saw him in a film that he did with Saoirse Ronan. Pride hadn't been released yet. I think he did this film called How We Live Now, I think, and it's a British film, very good film, and I watched him in that. He was the only actor who there was some tape available that I could see, and he did a long Skype callback where we did a lot of improvisation, some of which is in the movie, and he's a beautiful man, and he's a great actor. So.
I was thinking of Paul Dano.
Paul Dano?
As one of the possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, he's now in his late 20s, I think, so, but that he could have been a way to go, yeah.
And Nicholas Hamilton, he's brilliant, as the kid who wants to rebel against the way his father is living. How difficult or easy was it to work with him? Because you said even in real life he's a bit of a rebel.
Well, he was rebellious, but he's certainly not a problem. I think that Nick he's at that exact age where he's sort of finding his way, and he's not quite a man yet, but he's no longer a boy, whereas George at his age was sort of a young man. And so I think that was probably very much the way he navigates the world. But he was never rebellious to me. He wasn't mean to me or cruel or rude. He's a lovely guy, shows up to work, very hardworking young man. But I think he had no problem tapping into that rebellious streak, certainly.
And Shree cooks as Zaja. Is it Zaja?
Zaja, yeah, Zaja. Shree Crooks, yeah, with an R.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about her.
Sure. You know, one of the things you do when you cast kids is that I was not requiring them to deliver a performance. There were some children in that role and other roles that could really deliver a beautiful performance, but that was part of the equation, but not the entire equation. Really what you're hoping to do is match a kid's spirit to the spirit of their character. And Shree absolutely had that. When she came into the room, she's really outgoing and she was tomboyish and really open and lovely and warm and loving. And I mean, the character she plays, Zaja, is obsessed with death, that was based on one of my kids. They went through a period of time when they discover that people die, that everything dies, everything living dies, and they become obsessed with death. And they had all these questions about death, and it was kind of morbid curiosity. And I don't think Shree is particularly that way, but certainly her outgoing spirit matches the outgoing spirit of Zaja. Yeah.
And the song, Sweet Child of Mine, it took me by surprise because I didn't expect a Guns N' Roses song at the end, and that to interpret it in a very different way. Whose idea was it?
That was my idea. Originally in the script, there were 2 songs by Prince. And at the time, Prince was alive, and at the time he was allowing people to use a lot of his music. For many years he wouldn't. But the 2 songs that were in the film were the 2 Prince songs that were in the script were the exact 2 songs that he did not want anyone to use. So we kind of went back to the drawing board, and I listened to hundreds of songs. And I picked Sweet Child of Mine really because we wanted to take a song that was iconic and reinterpret it for a movie moment that you maybe hadn't experienced in that exact way. And I also thought it was correct in terms of the ages of the parents. They would have listened to that when they were younger, and that would have been maybe a song that was part of their youth.
Talk to me about Stefan.
Stefan Fontaine.
If Stefan Fontaine, your director of photography, beautiful photography. The first 5 minutes, you're puzzled where this movie is going, but you are captivated by the greenery.
Oh, that's good. Stefan Fontaine, I like all the rest of the crew, some of whom I'd known their work and some of whom just presented it. Stefan was a DP whose work I'd long admired. I had seen his work going back to, I think, one of his first films that he had shot, but I really became aware of him when he did The Beat My Heart Skipped and Un Prophète, A Prophet, and Rust and Bone. He collaborates frequently with Jacques Audiard, and I just am a fan of both of them. As Jacques is a director, I don't know him, but I'm a great fan of his work and Stefan's work. And you're trying to. I had an idea about how I wanted the photography to be, and he was the right man for the job in many ways. He's a great storyteller with his camera, and he has a great sensitivity to performance. And I wanted to shoot handheld. I wanted to breathe with the actors, and that's a way that he shoots frequently. He's capable of doing all sorts of other styles, but that seemed to be something that he specialized in or was a sweet spot for him, that he gravitated toward organically. And he's a brilliant storyteller with his camera.
What did your mother think of the film?
My mother has only seen a rough cut because I don't have a version of the final cut that I can show her. But I think she really liked it. I mean, she read it at a script stage, and I think she's happy. She gave me some of the elements in the film are autobiographical, and I think she's happy that she gave me that exposure in my life. And I think you'd have to ask her, but I think generally speaking, she's proud. I think she thinks it's a good film. So.
You've mentioned autobiographical quite a few times, and I know you went to a school which was the Steiner system or the Waldorf system. Yeah. Your mom helped establish one of the schools. Yeah. You are allergic to the word hippie because of the way you lived as a youngster. You've lived abroad. You speak more than one language. Tell us the autobiographical element, and I have one more question after that.
So there's really only three autobiographical elements. One is my mother did start some communal living situations in Oregon. I also lived in one in Northern California for a bit, and they were very different from the story in the movie. I did go to public school at that time. We lived very far away from a town, like hours from a town. We were 7 miles from a cement road. I mean, we were really out in the woods. And in the summer times, we would live in a teepee. There were some homes that had no plumbing and electricity, and some which did. So that's autobiographical. The other thing that's autobiographical is that the journey of Baudevin, played by George Mackay, is sort of autobiographial, and that I got to a period of my life where I really wanted to leave and be around kids my own age. That's really it, though. The rest was really aspirational, I would say, and that the certain things I aspired to be as a father.
Gavin Belson, where do you tap all that anger for Gavin Belson?
I think Gavin, I mean, I try and play Gavin as honestly and as earnestly as possible, and I think the comedy comes from him not being aware that he's actually a pretty, I hesitate to use the words devious or evil, because I think actually he really genuinely believes that he's making the world a better place, and that's where the comedy comes from. But really, again, it's like I don't write it, I just interpret it, and you have to give credit where credit is due, and that goes to Mike Judge and Alec Berg and Clay Tarver and Dan O'Keefe, who are the brain trust of the show. It's their concept, and I just manifest it. Right.
How did you do that bulldog scene?
Working with animals like children is difficult. Fortunately, bulldogs are pretty sedentary, so he just sat there. The jackrabbit was, but they're trained animals. The bulldog, I love bulldogs. He just sat there pretty much. He was fine. His breathing was very loud. The rabbit, the jackrabbit, wanted to move, but the bulldog was fine. Yeah.
Well, you live in Berkeley. You've lived in communes. So having a guru as a character for Gavin Belson, was that a surprise for you, or were you comfortable enough to work and roll those prayer beads?
I'm perfectly fine. I used to wear Buddhist beads myself, and my mother's a Buddhist, and so that's not that far-fetched for me.
How many autobiographical elements are there in Gavin Belson?
Probably none. I mean, I think that one of the great tragedies of my life is that I only play a billionaire on TV. I'm not an actual billionaire. Yeah, that would be useful. It would be nice. It'd be nice. It'd be nice to have.
Hey.
Never have any money worries at all. That would be a lovely thing for all of us,
It's never too late to belong to the Thrace Comma Club.
That's true. Well, maybe that will happen. I don't know. One can hope. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I really enjoyed watching your film.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our children shall be philosopher kings. Makes me so indescribably happy.
If you missed any of our TV shows, you can catch them on our YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter. My handle is @Kamla. And as always, thank you for tuning in.